Let me show y'all how I use AI in my job search. So I found this role online for a senior project manager, and I looked at the description, and I felt that I was, a little qualified for this, but I noticed that when you get to the minimum requirements, it starts saying like 7+ years, 12 plus 5. I'm like, oh shoot, let's go to Claude and see what Claude thinks. So I attached my resume and copied the job description and asked Claude to review it as a hiring manager. The reason I wanted to review it as a hiring manager because I needed to get into the mind frame of someone that wants to fill this role, right? So then I also asked it to see if I was at least 60% qualified for the role. When it comes to women, especially women of color, especially Black women, okay, we tend to not apply for roles that if it looks like, oh, I don't meet these requirements, or yeah, it's probably out of my league, they don't go after it. No, we need to go after it. But I'm gonna say at least 60%. Then I asked it to kind of look at what the concerns were. Like, what concerns would you have when you look at my resume, that would say, you know what, I don't know if I should take the risk with her. And then I also asked, how do I turn it into strengths? Because we don't want to just look at the bad. We want to know, how do we turn the bad into, a W. As y'all saw, the first thing it says is you're more than 60% qualified for this role, which is funny because I typically don't apply for senior project roles. I don't know why. Just maybe I think that that's just too much work that I'm gonna have, but I know I'm qualified for senior roles because of what I do and the experience that I have. And then it kind of told me why. So it kind of gave me some juice to remind me, like, this is why you're at minimum more than 60% qualified. Then we get to the concerns, right? So it's going to break down each concern that they would potentially have as my hiring manager. And then it's giving me feedback on how do I turn that concern into a strength. So how do we make this a W? So one of the first concerns, specific industry experience. So it's pretty much saying that the job prefers someone with experience in government services, healthcare, and insurance. I don't have that. So highlight how I know how to adapt and quickly learn, right? Next concern, years of experience. The job explicitly says 12 years experience of direct IT related. Why did I say that backwards? Now, my resume does not specifically say that. So the strength, how do we turn that into a W? Focus on the quality and diversity of my experience. Also, highlight how I've managed complex and enterprise-wide projects. So these big projects, and how I was able to do all that in a shorter time. I didn't need 12 years to start working on these complex projects. Next, it's talking about the specific technical knowledge. That's a concern because the job requires certain experience or highly recommends, or that would be a plus. And I don't have that because I literally don't. So we're not going to go and beat around the bush and try to go on YouTube and do a tutorial on Oracle. We're just going to highlight, look, I learn quickly. I can adapt, I can adjust. Like, get me on and I'm going to do what I got to do to learn the systems. Next concern, budget, right? So it emphasizes IT budget management, but I don't directly talk about my budgets on my resume, especially like the amounts and stuff. I think only like I remember maybe one spot where I talk about like the budgets for my campaigns, but I don't necessarily talk about how I'm managing the budget. So I would want to highlight that if I've done it. And then lastly, it's talking about vendor management. So it requires you having experience with soliciting, procuring, and managing IT vendors and subcontractors. And so my current resume does not explicitly say that. And so I need to go back and highlight that. And then when I'm in my interviews, I need to emphasize how much, how well I am with my communication and negotiation skills and stuff like that. So now that I know that I'm qualified, right, I can just go ahead and submit the resume as is. But if I want to address some of the concerns, right, specifically the vendor management, the budget management parts, because I know off the top of the dome, I've done that work. So we need to make sure that we put it in there. I would resubmit my resume into Claude and have Claude help me verbalize that type of experience. Like, how do I put this in my resume and where do I put it exactly? to showcase that I have those. So now instead of having 5 concerns, there would only be 3 concerns, right? Then after I make that update and adjustment, then I would send the resume in. Also, if I wanted to add a cover letter, I would go back into Claude after I update that resume and say, okay, now let's write a cover letter for this specific job. Matter of fact, let's go do that right now. Nah, y'all can't tell me this thing ain't eating. Y'all can't tell me this thing is eating. So y'all know how I feel about putting my personal information out there. That's the reason why I asked it to create pseudonames. But look at the cover letter that it created. Look at the material. It Dear hiring manager, writing to express my strong interest in this role, extensive experience managing complex IT projects, um, passion for delivering innovative technological solutions, current role, successfully manage the life cycle of these projects, da 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 da. All this is it. Um, all this was developed literally just based on my resume and the job description, right? And of course, I would go back in and I would read this. I'd make any adjustments that I feel is necessary before submitting it, but I would attach this just to be a better contender here. Claude does a really good job in explaining what it did for you, the key points that it covered, and then it also say, "Would you like me to explain or adjust any part of this?" And once I'm done, I'm gonna go submit this, right? So it's a process, and I will say that you may do this for the bulk of your roles. Some roles I find it necessary to kind of take the extra steps. Some of them it's very much no, I'm just going to just hit the apply button and submit a resume. But this is how I use AI to help me in my literal search. Okay, so what other questions that you guys may have when it comes to using AI to help with the resumes, help with the cover letters? Have y'all used AI to help you in this capacity? Like, I want to know.